Hi guys, James Fitch from Prok Fitch, and we're back in the studio to look at the second track off our Do Not Sleep EP. So this is Louder. This is the B-side to Tarzan. Again, stripped. It's on a label called Do Not Sleep, and their stuff tends to be a lot more underground and quite tracky. So just cool vibes, basically, dance floor vibes. For the B-side, we wanted something that was again really stripped, that would complement Tarzan, but still be different enough to appeal to people so that they could potentially play both records in their sets. And again, this is something that will fit really easily into our DJ sets. So we wanted it to be just a good groove and something that we can, sandwich in between, records to create a moment, or just, rolling it out for a couple of hours in a sweaty underground club. We'll look at the drums first. In this case, I'm trying to think of the inspiration behind this. Was this bass line. Really simple bass line, but a great groove to it. And we had that in our ideas folder from when we would have been auditioning bass lines. So this is a sample this time. We didn't play this one. It's off a sample pack, and I'll just play it with the kick and the clap so you can hear it on its own. So we like the groove of that, which is the reason why we used it to start, and there's also vocal in it as well, which we had in our ideas folder. But I'll start with the drums. Let me get those on a loop. On the master out, we've got the Oxford limiter this time. We swapped over to this recently, actually. Instead of the invisible limiter, we got the Oxford stuff. And yeah, that inflator works as a limiter, but also adds a nice bit of warmth to the sound as well. The drums are feeding in to this master drums channel, which only has the kick, only goes to this, and then the drum group feeds into that, and then into the master out. On the drums, we've got the vintage warmer, adding a nice bit of distortion and brightening up a little bit, crunching it together. We've got the quadrafuzz as well, and that has just got a bit of a boost around here. I'll play the drums together. So when we finished the track and we were mixing it, it was a case of going back to it, A-Bing it with other things, and there was a bit of a hole between 2K and 9K, which is why we boosted it off and then on. It's just filling out that mid-range a little bit, and the inflator is on there as well, acting as a limiter. Let's start with the kick. Again, sampled off a record most probably, and just the top rolled off. Must have been a hat on there because there's a top kick in here as well. I'll just solo that. It's just a little click just to add a nice bit of attack to it, because once all the other bits are in, we would have started with the kick, we would have added that top kick in afterwards just to make sure the kick was popping through nicely. I don't know what that is. Let's have a look. Nothing by the looks of it. Oh, a tiny bit of white noise. We've got the monitors quite quiet in here, so sometimes to add a really nice pop to a kick, you can add a tiny little bit of white noise before leading into the kick, so that it just has the effect of making it sound like really nice and crisp. And this is, says top kick there, but it's not. It's actually a little snare. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's actually a little snare, and that's just got a bit of EQ on it. The top kick also obviously has all the bottom rolled off, and that would have just been a kick out of a sample pack that had the right attack on it. Clap has got the little radiator on it, Sound Toys plugin with the heat turned up a little bit, just adds a nice bit of brightness and distortion. We put the primal tap on this. It's on there twice because it's automated on there as well, which I'll show you in a bit. But that little phasing that you can hear on the clap is off this Sound Toys primal tap plugin, which is primarily just a delay, but has some really cool like widening and phasing presets on it, just to make sounds a little bit more interesting, because it's so stripped. Again, wanting to give an identity to our drums, we added that to it. I'll solo it for you. Turn it off. So it's only very slight. I actually had the wrong one open there. It's actually only very slight, and this is just a preset called Monkey Flange, and the mix is slightly rolled off on it. So yeah, it just makes that sound a little bit more interesting. So add the hat in too. That's got a bit of EQ on it, and the D16 Devaster, which we use loads. This is a great distortion plugin. It's really good for mangling up drum sounds, especially hats, and even just finding some sources of inspiration, like flicking through the different presets on here. It gives you some great distortion. You've got loads of control over all the different filters as well. So if you find something that's too severe, it's really easy just to tailor it to fit in the track that you're making. So it's just adding a little bit more attack there and a little bit more bite. I'll move it on a little bit more actually, so we've got a few more drums playing. Little side stick there. We've got Pan Man on that, so every time it's playing, it's just flicking between left and right. Again, another Sound Toys plugin. It's great for just widening your mix a little bit, and you know, putting things in stereo, but also just making something quite simple sound a little bit more interesting as well. Even though most sound systems are mono, but it's still personal satisfaction that if you are listening to it on Spotify or on a mix, you get that kind of stereo effect. Little glitchy effect in there, which has just got a little bit of delay on it, a really super short tape delay, which this Echo Boys is great for, especially on vocals, just to get the vocals sat in there a bit without having to add loads of effects to stuff. We like our stuff to sound quite dry, which is why you won't very often see reverb on anything in one of our tracks, just because we'd rather use a really short delay to get something sat in there better than load it with reverb. So that's the main kind of simple drum groove with the kick in, and then there's a top loop that comes in here that adds a lot of vibe to the track. It's got a real drum machine vibe to it, and we've got the Devaster on that as well, and also this Waves Super Tap, just widening it a little bit. It's got a really short delay on the left side there, just to give it a bit more stereo and sit it in the mix better with the other things. I can solo that and turn it off on the Devastator if you want as well, so you can hear what it's doing to it. Not a great deal really, but it is adding a little bit more bite and distortion to it. So they're the drums. So let's look at the bass. So that's feeding into the bass group, which just has sidechain on it. The Vengeance multi-band again. And the main bass line, so the sample is cut into two, basically, because of the high notes that it plays not giving enough roll on the bottom end. We separated them, basically. Cool, so this is the main bass, giving all the bottom end, and that has got a multi-band envelope shaper on it. Just taking a little bit of the attack off here, because even with the side chain it was still a little bit too much, which is why there's been so much added to the kick as well to make it pop through, because the notes on the bass line are very attacky, but we still wanted the texture of it without rolling too much of the sound off of the top end. As you can see here, Fab Filter, EQ, there's a bit of detailed EQ taken off there just below 200, and yeah, we've rolled a lot of the texture out of that sound just to make it super subby, basically. But in doing that, we've had to add a higher octave as well. So this bass down here is the same thing, it's the full bass line, but up 12 semitones using the sound shifter. I'll just solo them both together so you can hear. And then muted. And then I'll play that one by itself. So this is just adding like a range of the bass that was missing just in the sample, which is actually an octave higher, so that you still get that full sound in the club and the bass still sounds full enough. We put the Super Tap on it to make it wider, just so it had kind of more of a stereo effect in the mix and sounded a bit fuller. And again, it's EQ'd quite heavily there, so we're only hearing that really between 1 and 200, and it's rolled off again on the bottom there, so we're really only after those frequencies there, which kind of add a little bit more texture to it. And it's side chaining on the group channel, mainly because the group channel is always there in case we do extra processing, and as we load up a project and we start something just through force of habit, it's there with the side chain on it. So I feel like this is side chain quite heavily there. You can see we've taken quite a bit off there, and again it's been side chained again. Oh, no, that's not the side chain, is it? That's the envelope shaper. Sometimes we'll side chain stuff twice, just to make sure that the kick's popping through. Yeah, so I mentioned the other Super Tap delay on the clap, which automates on in the break. And there you can hear we just whacked up the mix on one of the presets on there that just gives it that cool effect. Okay, so let's have a look at the vocals that we've got in here.
Manipulate volume.
So this is quite heavily processed, this little vocal cut is, which was sampled off a YouTube documentary, I think, about house music or about music of some sort. I'll play that dry for you first of all so you can hear it.
Manipulate volume.
So we've got the little altar boy on there, which is got the pitch taken down 1. We kind of alternate between using this Sound Toys plugin and the sound shifter, the Waves one, just because they treat the sound slightly differently. This pitch on here tends to mangle things a little bit more than the other one, than the sound shifter does, but that adds a little bit more charm to the sound. So that's why in this case we've used the pitch shift on here, because it kind of does crunch the sound quite a bit and change it. So in this case we're kind of looking for that to make it a little bit more interesting. It's got the crystallizer on it as well. Wicked Sound Toys plugin, we use this loads. It's great for making mental delays and pitching flying off everywhere, and also great for just adding some harmony to a sound, making it a bit weirder. Whoops, just close that. It's got the Echo Boys delay on it, again that tape echo, just really short, getting it sat in there nicely. Bottom end rolled off. Another crystallizer which is automating on to give you those effects.
Manipulate volume.
Kind of reverse delay. I'll turn that off and play it again.
Manipulate volume.
So you can hear there how we've treated the sound, you know, without those extra delays on it. And there's some reverb on there as well. There's me saying we never use reverb, and here we go, we finally found one. This Vintage Verb's wicked. It's really super coloured. It's great for nice long hauly delays. So there's that bit of vocal and how we treated that. And there's another vocal here, the louder vocal, which has got a lot of treatment on it as well. Let's have a look at that. I'll turn everything off on this as well, so you can have a listen.
Louder.
So yeah, we wanted just a one word thing really, but gave it quite a bit of treatment, starting off with the JJP Waves vocal plugin. This is wicked, adds loads of distortion to stuff, makes it sound like it's a dirty old sample. We pitched it down 3 on the sound shifter, took the formant down on it as well, which is why it does sound much lower, but we didn't want it to sound too pitched down, which is why we added the formant to it as well, because we just were looking for something that was lower but didn't sound like it was just super pitched down. It's got the tape echo on there again, just to sit it in there nicely. A longer delay as well. No, another tape echo. So we've got 2 on there. The crystallizer, which we're using the break, which you can have a look at in a bit, and a bit of the top rolled off, because that JJP does add quite a lot of hiss to the top end, which you can change here with the highs and the presence as well on those parameters. But in this case, we just whacked everything on and rolled it off on here. And that's the result. And there's a duplicate of that channel down here as well, which we will have just used, that had some extra effects on it. Rather than automating them on and off, kind of just lazy way of duplicating the channel and sticking something on it and just darting those in throughout the arrangement. These yellow things down here are all effects, so they're just bits to add, make stuff a little bit more interesting. This whisper here, it's just got a bit of reverb on, And then these other little effecty bits down here have got just a bit of delay on, crash effects, just a bit of EQ. This loop's chopped up here, slightly different both times because of the open hats it's got in it. So they alternate, hence the red and the orange, just to make sure everything's nice and organised when we're arranging it. And there's an extra bit of perk that comes in here. It's just a loop that we've chopped up and quantized so that it works in the groove, and possibly deleted a few notes out of there as well, just so that the rhythm worked. And it's got quite a bit of treatment as well. I'll play you it without the treatment on. So we tune this slightly, just very slightly down by 0.2 cents actually, because it would have been clashing with the bass, and added Decimal, another D16 plugin. It's basically a glorified bit crusher, but it's wicked. It's got loads more on it than just the bit crusher has. It's got different filters built into it as well, and it's great for giving stuff a bit of a bit crushedness to it without it sounding too bit crushed, if that makes sense. Just a nice bit of distortion. We've got a multi-band envelope shaper on here as well, with the attack rolled off, and the mids and the tops, because you can hear when I played it there, it's quite toppy, it's quite clicky. We've got Onboy's delay on there, which comes on in the break, which I'll show you in a bit, and just a bit at the bottom rolled off. So as we go into the break here, we pitch this perk loop, so it's automated in with the sound shifter. And the feedback comes up on the delay as well. Pitches up again. And then let's look at the effects on those vocals in the break as well. Starts off just filtered down with the Pro Q. It filters up, and then as it filters up, it's got the crystallizer on there and the Echo Boys as well. So I think the crystallizer comes up, and it's pitching up as well. So it's just the delays pitching on that, which kind of gives it that really super like risery kind of effect, without having to add like any big risers in there or anything like that. Keeping it nice and stripped, but keeping it interesting as well, using the elements that we chose to use. There's a bit of vinyl crackle down there. Is there a vinyl crackle? Yeah, it's really, really low in the mix. And that little high-pitched Atmos as well, which has got the Phase Mistress on it. Really very subtle, but just adding a little bit more texture to that break. You can hear that vinyl pop actually in a few places a little bit more clearly. So that pitches down and the vocal goes a bit mental. and then it pitches down right at the end there, just so it sits right when it drops back in after the break. And one thing I didn't look at was this ride that comes in, which has got the phase mistress on it, full whack. So let's turn that off and listen to what that ride's doing. It's phasing quite heavily, and there's just a sidechain on there and a bit of EQ. Super subtle, it's kind of more of a texture, but it keeps the groove interesting as it's rolling along. And then there was also a little clap. We've got this little clap delays channel down here, which is just kind of doing a little fill thing with the Glitch Bitch, which is a Vengeance plugin, and all it's doing is just looping that section where it's automated on and repeating it but slowing it down. It's a really cool plugin to do some really crazy things with vocals. It's got like filters built into it, or just other little sounds. It's definitely worth having a play with. There's some really cool stuff. In this case, it's just automating on with a bit of delay, slowing down. You could do the same thing with a delay, but when we were going through the track and working on it, we fiddled around with this plugin to do something that was a little bit longer, but ended up shortening it because it was a little bit too much for what we wanted. And that is the breakdown of all the bits and pieces. So we can look at the arrangement. Pretty straightforward, starting with a high pass with the bass in as well. This tracky stuff tends to just work starting it with most of the stuff in, so that you're getting the groove and everything that you've got from the off, rather than having this big moment where you bring the bass line in. It's slightly more of a techno arrangement doing it this way, and it just works really. That's why we do it. No clap in this to start with, so it's super stripped. Just a few little effects scattered in there, and then we'll use the glitch bitch that I was showing you a minute ago on the clap, slightly longer here, so you can hear what it does when it's more drawn out and that delay slows down. So there's no real control over what that's doing there. It just sounds messy, but it sounds nice. It works. Grooves along for a bit before this first little drop here. There's only one break in this track, so there's lots of little kick dropouts and what have you to keep it interesting. Just the bass there. Again, those little clap delays there, leading into the first time you hear a bit of vocal. And then like a mini kind of break here. First time you hear that louder vocal, which is kind of the probably the hookiest part of vocal in the track. It's like super simple. There's a little snare roll there as well, which has just got a little bit of delay on it and some EQ. And that little ride comes in there as well. I forgot to mention here, after that little drop, that big loop kind of comes in, which picks it up quite a bit. And then again, we've got that little ride bit that comes in there. Keep it interesting. a few of those little effects littered throughout. And then bringing that little perk loop in there, which we can then carry over into the break, and is a new element that keeps rolling. Ride changes a little bit there because the groove of that was clashing with that new bit of perk, and that last bit of perk there, we kind of found we'd arranged the track but felt like it was missing something. It was a bit too basic, which is why we went back and added the perk loop and then had to change that ride there, because the frequency and what it was doing worked, but we kind of wanted to keep it but add an extra element to the track as well. For us, when we're making our records, a lot of it is about the selection of sounds, so keeping it simple but just making sure that the sounds we use are prominent enough to not need to clutter it with lots of other things. We changed the way recently that we do make our tracks, because we used to literally have so many channels of drums just doing tiny little things, which worked in the context of the music that we were making then, but we've recently just been stripping stuff back a lot more, being super selective with the sounds that we're using and just using them as best as we possibly can. So break here using the vocal. It's the only time you really hear it repeated, to be honest. With the perk pitching, some clap stuff going on over there with the glitch pitch. And the primal tap, no, that's the primal tap, not the glitch pitch, sorry. And just a really simple thing we've done at the top here is we've just dipped the volume there by a couple of dB over the course of the break, just to make sure that when we're in the club, when it kicks back in there, it's got loads of power and it works on the dance floor. There's also the high pass there. We kind of tend to do our high passes on the master. Probably just a lazy habit rather than having an separate effects channel set up, or having to separately EQ things to high pass them, or even having to do the drums and then the bass as well. Occasionally we will have to high pass just the drums channel if we wanted to keep the bass in, but we're quite lazy when it comes to the arrangements, just keeping it simple and rough. And there's a slight volume drop here on the whole drums bus as well in the break, again to make sure that when it drops in out of the break, it's got loads of power and it's nice and loud, and it works on the dance floor. So break. So if you turn that up nice and loud, you'll get the benefits of all those little dips in volume. Kind of tend to do that on all our breaks, even if it's just by like a dB when you're listening to something really loud in a club. It's all about making sure it has that impact on the dance floor, so little tweaks to the volume can make a huge difference, as the same with high passing stuff. Just increasing the high pass a little bit towards the end just gives it a bit more impact. Kicks in quite stripped so that we still have something else to add. This loop comes back in there, keeps it grooving. And then that perk loop comes back in there with a little snare roll just to keep the energy going. clap there, slowing right down for that little drop out there to get rid of that perk loop. It's quite a full part, so fiddling around with that to get rid of it, kind of rather than just dropping it out, was too abrupt, so we needed to add a little break in there to create a bit more tension to what was going to happen next and not make such a big deal out of that big part dropping out, and just to keep the groove going as well, to keep it flowing nicely. And then mix out here. Drop the hat. Nice and easy, no looping needed. Nice, easy work for the DJs. And that's it for the arrangement on that. So what we listen for in a kick drum, a nice punch, cutting through with the bass, nice sub to it, so it's nice and warm. Because we start our tracks with a kick and the drums, we kind of tend to know what we want straight away, that something's going to have the right vibe to it with the beats. So we'll know from the inspiration that we have, whether it's the vocal or we sit down and say we want to write something that's a little bit houseier or something that's a bit dubbier. We kind of know straight away what kick we want to use. Quite often there'll be 5 or 6 in there in audio, which we flick between as we kind of put the bass in, and they can change, but they'll always have a similar kind of charm to them because we're pretty set on the sound that we're going for. And if we're going to use loads of old school drum machine-y sounds, then we'll tend to kind of look for a different folder than if we're making something like this, for example. Yeah, so when we're EQing our highs, our hi-hats and stuff, it tends to be it's pretty uniform really, just turning the Pro Q on and dragging it just to between 100 and 200, because even though you're not really hearing any of those sounds, I still feel like there's a bit of body in the hats, which is why it's been boosted here, more in the mids. But I like the noise that the hats add to the groove, especially when it's as stripped as this. You are looking for a specific frequency that's doing a certain thing in the track, but we don't create so much space by EQing all that kind of bottomless noise out. It's always there, because I feel like with our drums we like to make sure that there's enough mid in there filled out to make the drum sound full enough. When we're mixing, we'll always check stuff on flick between stereo and mono, just to make sure that anything we're doing with any panning that's going on or any stereo widening works in mono, which would be in most clubs, as well as sounding good on Spotify and all the different ways of streaming. So the sub in the track, depending on where we go with the bass, this is like super subby, this bass is, so we'll choose a kick that's got a bit more punch to it and a bit more mid, but if we're using a different synth where the bass line's a bit more prominent and a bit more midi, then we'll look to try and get a bit more of that bottom end from the kick drum, which sometimes if it means pitching it down a little bit works, or just layering it, or just using just clever EQ. Yeah, I think part of our trademark sound is our drums. We often get people asking us how we do our drums, and for us, because of the way that we learnt to produce music, I think the drums have always been part of our identity, because we've wanted to make them stand out and sound different to everyone else's. and I'd like to think that if you listen to our drums compared to anyone else's, they'll always be different because of the time that we spend selecting the sounds that we use and making sure we're not using loops that other people have used, or if we do use one, that will distort it enough or add enough to it to make it sound different in the context of our record. There's, especially with tech house, it's becoming very generic as a genre. When you listen to a lot of tech house, a lot of it sounds the same. It sounds like people using the same drum loops, same sounds, whether they're sampling each other's drums and what have you, and recycling them, I don't know, or they're using the same sample packs. I mean, there are certain sample packs that do really well that everyone kind of goes to for their sounds when they're making tech house. But for us, we use the contact stuff and look for the different weird sounds using a lot of old sample packs as well, just to try and make sure that our stuff is different enough in a genre of music that is quite simple to produce in a lot of respects. Cool, so I hope you found that insightful. That's us done for today. If you've got any questions that you'd like to follow up on, please feel free to drop us a message on our social media. At Prok Fitch for Instagram is probably the easiest place to find us. This EP is going to be dropping end of September, so hopefully you guys are feeling it, and it'll be available across all platforms for you to check out. Also got loads of exciting new music coming up as well, on some cool labels. So yeah, we hope you guys look forward to listening to that as much as we've enjoyed making it.